Henry never murdered anyone. At least, that's the story told in Martin Scorsese's movie, Goodfellas. In it, Henry Hill is a mob associate who engaged in all sorts of crime without ever committing murder. But is that really the picture Scorsese paints of him? What does the movie really tell us about Henry Hill? The movie puts a lot of emphasis on Henry as some kind of good guy. Maybe too much emphasis. In a scene early on in the movie, there is something that seems so oddly placed that it can only mean one thing. Henry wanted to appear innocent of murder. But you be the judge. After several scenes depicting him learning the ropes and building useful gangster skills, a different kind of scene is inserted into the mix. One showing him as someone with compassion, as someone with a big heart. There is a man calling out in pain, making his way down the sidewalk towards where Tuddy's Pizzeria is located. Henry sees the man and decides to help him. Tuddy wants Henry to leave the man to himself, but instead of obeying Tuddy, he uses the aprons he has grabbed from the kitchen counter to help the wounded man. Meanwhile, you can hear Tuddy in the background telling him not to help, telling him there should be none of that in their joint. Tuddy tells him he's a real jerk for wasting aprons on the wounded man and realizes he's got to toughen this kid up. Ray Liotta narrates how Henry felt bad for the man and realizes how Paulie wouldn't want the man dying in their establishment. He gets how Tuddy may be right. The scene ends there, and we never hear about the wounded man again. We never see anything else about Tuddy or his bakery. That scene doesn't go anywhere. Or does it? Why would Scorsese include that scene if it wasn't trying to say something? Well, he wouldn't. This scene could be telling us the reason Paulie wouldn't want anyone dying in their restaurant, which is to avoid having the cops come over and getting a closer look at the place. Another reason is that it's gratuitous. Henry may have chosen to create a different image of himself. It's almost amusing how the scene stands out like a sore thumb. I mean, Henry? Feel bad about the guy getting shot? Really? He wanted to help him out so badly that he ignored Tuddy scolding him. He actually disobeyed his boss because he's what? A really great kid with a big heart? Yeah, I don't think so. That scene most likely intimates that we shouldn't take Henry's story at face value. It's a wrench thrown into Henry's facade of innocence. It's a hint, a rather glaring one, that Henry, as a good guy, doesn't make sense. I mean, the kid wanted to be a gangster. There's another scene that challenges Henry's good image. In the moment leading up to Billy's murder, Henry, like the good friend that he is, helps to defuse the situation. When that doesn't work, he is shown obeying Jimmy, frantically running to shut the door and locking it. But then, while Tommy and Jimmy are killing bats, Henry is stunned into silence, just like in the opening scene. He stands at the sidelines watching as his friends beat the living shit out of Billy. I mean, Henry is just there, literally, just watching. Can you believe that? A seasoned gangster? Paralyzed by what? Shock? I mean, this guy must have been some kind of special, right? What kind of guy would have the privilege of hanging around the likes of Jimmy Conway, one of the most feared and successful mobsters in Brooklyn, and Tommy DeVito, one of the craziest, if he weren't really special? Haven't you ever wondered why Henry just watched them? Okay, if you were a mobster, and these guys were your best mob buddies, and they were whacking someone, wouldn't it be only natural for you to join in? There's an old saying that goes, "Tell me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are." Now, if you're torn by your morals, then wouldn't you want nothing to do with them in the first place? In the mob, where money comes first and everyone needs to prove their worth or to have an edge, what was Henry's? What did Jimmy and Tommy gain from having him around all the time? If he didn't do as much as they did, wouldn't that make him dead weight? Would his two gangster buddies really have had, as part of their team, someone who didn't do his fair share? It's hard to believe that his role was always the clean and easy stuff. You know, the kind that doesn't get your hands dirty. It's hard to believe, since in everything they did, other than the Lufthansa heist, all three of them always got their hands dirty, together. They even dug up Billy's body together. Now, why would Henry do that? He didn't have to be there, did he? After all, he didn't help kill the guy, right? So why was he up there, digging with them? Digging wasn't a thing they enjoyed doing. Jimmy makes complaints about it after Tommy kills Spider, remember? And if you're wondering why Henry wasn't a part of the heist, when they shared their opportunities, Don't forget that Henry was handling the Pittsburgh drug operation. It is also at this point when he starts getting high, maybe all the time. To Jimmy, the consummate businessman, Henry was more of a liability high than he was an asset. Now, you could argue that Henry didn't have to kill anyone, because he would never get made. Well then, that would mean Jimmy never had to do it either. But he did. You could say that Henry wasn't allowed to kill anyone, but he wasn't allowed to deal drugs either, and yet he did. You could say that Henry was not an enforcer or muscle. He was an earner, sure, but so were Jimmy and Tommy. They were earners too, but they killed people as a matter of course. That's how they took care of business. And what do we know to be true about mobsters? They don't let anything get in the way of business. Sure, there are theories thrown around that Henry actually lied about a lot of things. But if we base our assumptions on the movie alone, and if we believe that Scorsese never includes a scene that goes nowhere, then we can assume that Henry was lying about being innocent of murder. Why would he lie about his innocence? Well, for one thing, the movie, as well as the book by Nicholas Pileggi on which it is based, had to sell. There had to be something about Henry that would make audiences take his side. He needed to be seen as a good guy. How do you do that? By making yourself not look like the vicious gangster you really were. This would mean that the pizzeria scene actually does lead somewhere. It's meant to look too good to be true. It's trying to tell us that Henry is only trying to appear good, to appear like someone you can root for. Because you gotta ask, if he was such a good-natured guy, how did he last so long in the mob? In a drunken interview decades after the movie's release, Henry was a guest caller on the Howard Stern radio show. On it, he was accused by other mobsters of lying about himself. They said the movie made his life look more glamorous than it actually was. On the same radio show, Hill once confessed that by his own hand, he had actually committed murder when he was younger. Based on the movie, that just doesn't track. Because the movie shows him to have had a bit more of a conscience when he was younger, the opposite of what he had confessed. We'll never really know the truth. It's been over a decade since his death. If we believe that mobsters think of themselves first, it's easy to think Hill made himself look so much better in fiction than he actually was in fact. If we also believe that those mobsters who claimed to have been there and known Henry at the time, then it would seem like Henry didn't have as much power and prestige as he made himself appear. If Martin Scorsese added the pizzeria scene to show just how much this guy wanted to improve his image, to be known as a good guy, a literal good fellow, maybe it's because he had something to hide. What was it?